The face in the mirror was almost unrecognizable. Ethan Wallace, usually the picture of luxury with his tailored suits and piercing blue eyes, had been transformed. His sandy blonde hair was now a dull shade of brown, tucked under a generic black cap. The green contact lenses dulled his natural intensity, and a meticulously applied mustache sat awkwardly above his lips. His crisp designer wardrobe had been swapped for a simple black and white waiter's uniform, plain, unremarkable, and anonymous. "It's now or never," Ethan murmured to himself, his voice barely audible over the hum of the city beyond his penthouse window. He turned away from the mirror, leaving behind the man he had been for 32 years. In his place stood Ethan Collins, a fictional name for a very real mission. 2 years earlier, Ethan had inherited Wallace Hotels from his late father. Though the chain had always prided itself on excellence, recent months had told a different story. Online reviews were scathing, detailing everything from unclean rooms to inattentive staff. Anonymous employee forums painted an equally grim picture: poor working conditions, abusive management, and constant understaffing. The reports from his executive team told a different story. Everything is fine. But Ethan wasn't buying it. The Aurora Grand, the jewel of his empire, was slipping. Guest satisfaction scores had plummeted, occupancy rates were dwindling, and profits were in free fall. Yet none of his interventions seemed to work. Frustrated and desperate to uncover the truth, he devised an unorthodox plan: go undercover as a waiter to experience the hotel's daily operations from the ground up. Ethan stepped into the bustling employee entrance of the Aurora Grand. The scent of cleaning supplies and fresh laundry overwhelmed him as he navigated the narrow corridors, a world apart from the grand marble lobby he was used to. He approached the personnel office, where a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a tired smile greeted him. "You must be the new hire," she said, flipping through a stack of papers. "Ethan Collins, right?" Ethan nodded, trying to mask his nervousness. "Yes, ma'am." "I'm Sophia Moore, head of HR. Welcome aboard. You'll be covering shifts in housekeeping and the restaurant. Here's your schedule and access card. Your first shift starts in 15 minutes. Head to the 4th floor. Marcus Reeves will give you your assignments." Her tone was brisk, but not unkind. She handed him a laminated badge with his new identity: Ethan Collins, waiter. "Thank you," Ethan replied, clutching the badge like a lifeline. As he rode the service elevator to the 4th floor, Ethan couldn't help but feel the weight of what he was doing. The luxury he had always taken for granted, fine dining, lavish suites, pristine service, suddenly felt distant, almost alien. He realized that, for the first time in his life, he wasn't the one calling the shots. The elevator doors opened, revealing a bustling hallway filled with employees in various states of exhaustion. Ethan spotted Marcus Reeves, a burly man in his 40s, with a clipboard in hand and a perpetually stern expression. "You must be the new guy," Marcus grunted, not bothering to look up from his clipboard. "Take that cart and start with rooms 401 to 410. 30 minutes per room. If you fall behind, you stay until you're done." Ethan nodded, grabbing the cleaning cart as Marcus barked another command at a nearby housekeeper. As he wheeled the cart down the hallway, he heard Marcus mutter, "Newbies? They never last." Ethan swallowed hard. What have I gotten myself into? The first thing Ethan noticed about working at the Aurora Grand was the pace, relentless and unyielding. From the moment Marcus Reeves, the head of housekeeping, handed him his cleaning assignments, it was clear there would be no grace period. The cheerful facade of the hotel's service motto, "Luxury lives here," faded as soon as Ethan stepped into his first guest room. Room 401 was a mess. Wet towels were strewn across the floor. The bed linens looked like they had been wrestled into submission, and a half-eaten sandwich sat forgotten on the nightstand. Ethan stared at the disaster before him, overwhelmed by the sheer amount of work required. 30 minutes, he muttered under his breath. How is that even possible? Grabbing the cleaning supplies from his cart, he dove in, scrubbing surfaces and stripping the bed, as sweat began to form on his brow. The scent of cleaning chemicals stung his nose, and by the time he had finished, his once soft hands were red and raw. He wheeled the cart to the next room, already feeling the strain in his muscles. By the time he reached room 404, Marcus appeared in the hallway, clipboard in hand. His stern gaze bore into Ethan. 2 rooms in 45 minutes, Marcus barked. You're behind. I'm doing my best, Ethan replied, trying to keep his tone even. Your best better get faster, Marcus snapped. Because if you don't pick up the pace, you're out by the end of the week. As Marcus walked away, Ethan felt a mixture of frustration and disbelief. This wasn't just about hard work. It was about an impossible workload and a complete lack of respect for the people doing it. By lunchtime, Ethan was exhausted. He made his way to the employee cafeteria, a stark contrast to the elegant dining areas reserved for guests. The fluorescent lighting buzzed faintly, and the smell of reheated food lingered in the air. Employees sat scattered across the room, eating in silence with tired expressions. Ethan grabbed a plate of bland pasta and sat at an empty table. Before long, a young woman with a kind smile slid into the seat across from him. You must be new, she said. I'm Sophia Carter. Ethan, he replied, forcing a smile. Yeah, first day. It shows, Sophia said with a laugh. Don't worry. Everyone feels like quitting after their first shift. Ethan chuckled nervously. Good to know. As they talked, Sophia's warmth became apparent. She spoke of the challenges with a mix of resignation and humor, but beneath her words was a clear passion for her work. It wasn't long before Ethan learned about the deeper issues plaguing the hotel. The worst is Marcus, Sophia confided, leaning in slightly. He acts like we're disposable. And then there's Robert, the general manager. He's even worse. What do you mean? Ethan asked, genuinely curious. Sophia hesitated, glancing around the room. Let's just say, he doesn't see us as people. To him, we're just tools to get the job done. Before Ethan could press further, a shrill voice echoed through the cafeteria. Break time ended 2 minutes ago. Back to work. The employees scrambled to clear their trays. Sophia shot Ethan an apologetic look before hurrying off. Ethan stayed behind for a moment, observing the scene. The exhaustion on everyone's faces was undeniable. He realized he was glimpsing a side of his hotel he had never truly understood, a side filled with overworked employees and a culture of fear. Ethan returned to his cleaning duties, more determined than ever to understand the challenges his staff faced. As the hours passed, he began to notice patterns: shoddy equipment that slowed productivity, disorganized supply closets that wasted time, and managers who barked orders without offering solutions. Later that afternoon, while vacuuming the hallway, Ethan heard a commotion near the front desk. He glanced over and saw Marcus towering over a young receptionist, his voice low but menacing. This is the 3rd time this week, Mia, Marcus growled. If you screw up one more time, you're out. Do you understand me? The receptionist, barely out of her teens, nodded silently, her face pale. Ethan clenched his fists, anger bubbling beneath the surface. He wanted to intervene, to tell Marcus this wasn't how employees should be treated. But he knew he had to stay in character. For now, he would watch and learn. As the day came to a close, Ethan wheeled his cart back to the supply room, his body aching and his mind racing. He passed by the staff bulletin board and noticed a handwritten note pinned to the corkboard. The bold letters caught his eye. "We are not robots. Respect us or lose us." Ethan stared at the note, his heart pounding. This was more than just a complaint. It was a call to action. Someone in the hotel was already pushing back against the toxic culture, and Ethan was determined to find out who. He turned toward the hallway, his thoughts swirling. What kind of workplace have I been running all these years? As he walked toward the exit, the weight of the day settled on his shoulders. Tomorrow, he knew, would bring even more revelations and possibly more challenges than he was ready to face. Ethan Wallace wasn't a stranger to hard work, but nothing had prepared him for the grueling pace of life at the Aurora Grand. By the end of his second day, his arms were sore, his back ached, and he had developed a newfound respect for the people who kept the hotel running. Yet it wasn't just the physical labor that gnawed at him. It was the culture. A toxic air of fear and distrust seemed to permeate every corner of the hotel. The break room was unusually quiet when Ethan entered on his third day. Employees sat in small clusters, speaking in hushed tones or staring blankly into their meals. He spotted Sophia Carter at a corner table and made his way over. "Rough shift already?" Ethan asked, sliding into the chair opposite her. Sophia gave him a tired smile. "Always, but I'm used to it by now." Ethan hesitated, unsure of how much to probe. "Can I ask you something? How long have you been here?" "5 years," she said, her smile fading. "It used to be better, you know, before Robert Hawthorne took over as general manager. Back then, we had enough staff, and people actually liked working here." "What changed?" Ethan asked, leaning forward. Sophia sighed. "Robert changed everything. He's obsessed with cutting costs and meeting targets. He doesn't care how much it burns us out." As she spoke, Ethan couldn't help but notice how her voice carried a mix of frustration and sadness. "Why do you stay?" he asked. "For the guests," Sophia said simply. "When you get to make someone's day better, even if it's just by remembering their name or getting their coffee just right, it's worth it. At least, it used to be." Before Ethan could respond, Sophia glanced at her watch and stood. "Break's over. Don't fall behind, Ethan." Ethan returned to his duties, his thoughts churning. He had spent years reading reports and listening to presentations about the hotel's operations, but none of it had captured the reality he now saw firsthand. Later that afternoon, while cleaning the presidential suite, Ethan overheard raised voices in the hallway. He froze, instinctively stepping closer to the door. "You call this acceptable?" came the booming voice of Robert Hawthorne. Ethan peeked through the crack in the door and saw Robert berating a middle-aged housekeeper. "I'm sorry, sir," the woman stammered, clutching her cleaning supplies. "I didn't—" "Sorry doesn't cut it," Robert snapped. "If you can't do your job, I'll find someone who can." Ethan's fists clenched as he watched the housekeeper shuffle away, her head bowed. Robert's expression was one of pure disdain. Ethan had always believed in holding people accountable, but this wasn't accountability. It was cruelty. The incident left Ethan shaken. For years, he had taken pride in being a hands-off leader, trusting his managers to handle day-to-day operations. But now he realized how blind he had been. The toxic environment at the Aurora Grand wasn't just a failure of management. It was a failure of leadership. His leadership. That evening, Ethan returned to the staff break room. On the bulletin board, the note he had seen the day before still hung in its place. "We are not robots. Respect us or lose us." Something about the note stuck with him. It was defiant yet weary, a plea for dignity from someone who felt unseen and unheard. He decided he had to find out who had written it. The next day, Ethan struck up conversations with more of his colleagues, careful not to arouse suspicion. He spoke to Jonah, a veteran bellhop who had been with the hotel for over 2 decades. Jonah was an encyclopedia of stories, some amusing, others disheartening. "This place used to be the best," Jonah said, as he polished a brass luggage cart. "We had regulars who'd come back every year just because of the staff. Now, guests barely remember our names, and management doesn't care to introduce us." "What do you mean?" Ethan asked. Jonah sighed. "It's all about numbers now. How many guests we check in, how many complaints we avoid. There's no room for personal touches anymore." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "Have you ever tried suggesting changes?" Jonah chuckled bitterly. "Oh, plenty of times. But Robert doesn't listen. He's too busy reminding us how replaceable we are." By the end of the week, Ethan had begun piecing together a clearer picture of the hotel's dysfunction. The staff weren't just overworked, they were demoralized. Creativity and initiative had been stifled under Robert's iron grip. Yet there was a quiet strength in people like Sophia and Jonah, a determination to do their best, despite the odds. As Ethan wheeled his cleaning cart down the hallway that evening, he spotted something new pinned to the bulletin board. "They can break our backs, but not our spirits." Ethan felt a surge of hope. Whoever was behind these notes wasn't just venting, they were rallying, and he intended to find them. What he didn't know was that Robert was growing suspicious. The subtle changes Ethan had started making, improving the organization of cleaning carts, streamlining supply orders, hadn't gone unnoticed. And Robert was determined to root out whoever was disrupting his control. The game was about to get much more dangerous. The routine at the Aurora Grand was grueling, but it gave Ethan Wallace something his spreadsheets and reports never could. A raw, unfiltered glimpse into the lives of his employees. The more he observed, the more he realized the magnitude of the problem. Yet, amidst the relentless chaos, he began to find allies in unexpected places. The first ally was Sophia Carter. Ethan had been drawn to her kindness from the start, but as the days passed, he saw her true strength. Sophia wasn't just a waitress, she was a quiet force of resilience and innovation. She moved through her shifts with practiced efficiency, but her eyes always lingered on details others ignored. It was Sophia who first mentioned the hotel's failing communication systems. "It's not just about hard work," she told Ethan one evening, her voice low as they stocked the cafeteria. "We waste so much time because the departments don't talk to each other. Housekeeping doesn't know when maintenance finishes repairs, and reception doesn't get updates. When rooms are cleaned, guests get frustrated, and we get blamed." Ethan nodded, filing the information away. "Have you ever brought this up to management?" Sophia's smile was bitter. "I tried once. Robert told me to stick to pouring coffee." Then there was Jonah, the veteran bellhop. If Sophia represented the future of the Aurora Grand, Jonah was its past. With decades of experience, he knew the hotel better than anyone. But years of being overlooked had made him wary of new faces. Winning his trust was no small feat. "You don't seem like the others," Jonah said one afternoon, as they waited by the lobby elevators. "Most new hires come in with big ideas and leave when they see how things really are." "I'm here to stay," Ethan replied. Jonah raised an eyebrow. "We'll see about that." The third ally was Mia Harper, the young receptionist Ethan had seen berated by Marcus. Over time, he learned she was more than the nervous employee she appeared to be. Mia had been keeping a detailed journal of staff complaints and guest incidents, a record of everything that went wrong at the hotel. "It's not just venting," Mia explained. when Ethan stumbled across her scribbling in the break room one evening. "If things ever change, I want there to be proof of what we've been through." By the end of the week, Ethan had formed a fragile but growing network. Sophia, Jonah, and Mia represented different corners of the hotel, but they all shared the same frustrations. Together, they began discussing ideas for improvement, brainstorming ways to make their jobs more manageable. One evening, Sophia pulled Ethan aside. "I have an idea," she said, her voice cautious. "It's small, but it could make a difference." She handed him a notebook filled with sketches and notes, outlining a color-coded task system for housekeeping. Different colors represented different room statuses, ready for cleaning, maintenance needed, or guest occupied. "This could save so much time," Ethan said, flipping through the pages. "Why hasn't anyone tried this?" "Because no one listens," Sophia replied. "But maybe they'll listen to you." Ethan hesitated. Sophia didn't know the full truth about who he was, and he wasn't ready to tell her yet. Instead, he made her a promise. "Let's test it ourselves. If it works, we'll find a way to make management take notice." The following morning, Ethan implemented Sophia's system quietly, starting with his assigned rooms. He placed laminated color-coded cards on his cleaning cart and used them to coordinate with other housekeepers. By the end of his shift, he noticed a dramatic improvement. Rooms were cleaned faster, and fewer mistakes were made. Word spread quickly among the staff. Jonah started using the system for bellhop requests, and even Mia found a way to adapt it to reception. For the first time in years, employees felt a glimmer of hope. But not everyone was pleased. Robert Hawthorne had noticed the sudden improvements and wasn't happy about the lack of control. During a tense meeting with Marcus, he voiced his frustrations. "There's no way this is happening on its own," Robert said, pacing the office. "Someone's behind this. Find out who." "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, though he looked uneasy. Robert's paranoia began to spread. He scrutinized every shift report, questioned employees about changes, and even started patrolling the hallways. His presence was oppressive, and it wasn't long before the staff began to feel the strain. One evening, after a particularly grueling shift, Ethan returned to the staff break room. Jonah and Mia were already there, their faces etched with concern. "Robert's looking for someone to blame," Mia whispered. "He's been asking questions about you." Ethan's heart sank. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing," Jonah said firmly. "But you need to be careful." As Ethan mulled over their warning, Sophia entered the room, her face lit with excitement. "The system's working," she said, holding up a chart showing the drop in guest complaints over the past week. "This is proof we're making a difference." Ethan forced a smile, but his mind was elsewhere. Robert's suspicion was growing, and it was only a matter of time before he discovered the truth. Ethan knew he couldn't keep his identity hidden forever, but the timing wasn't right. Not yet. As the group dispersed for the night, Ethan lingered in the break room, staring at the note still pinned to the bulletin board. "They can break our backs, but not our spirits." The words had never felt more relevant. Ethan knew the fight was far from over, but with allies like Sophia, Jonah, and Mia, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Together, they could take on Robert and the toxic culture he had created. But as Ethan left the room, he couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was just beginning. The wheels of change had begun to turn within the Aurora Grand. For the first time in years, the employees experienced a glimmer of hope. Thanks to Ethan Wallace's quiet efforts and Sophia Carter's innovative ideas. However, progress came with a price. Robert Hawthorne's growing paranoia cast a shadow over their fragile victories. Ethan's test of Sophia's color-coded task tracking system was a success. Word spread like wildfire among the housekeeping staff, and soon other departments began adapting the idea. Maintenance crews used the system to prioritize urgent repairs, while receptionists used it to streamline guest check-ins and special requests. For the first time in months, operations felt smoother, more cohesive. In the cafeteria during a late-night break, Ethan, Sophia, Jonah, and Mia huddled together, reviewing the data Sophia had meticulously gathered. Guest complaints about room delays have dropped by 20% this week, Sophia said, her excitement barely contained. And housekeeping efficiency is up by almost 30%. That's fantastic, Jonah said, nodding approvingly. I've been here long enough to know these numbers don't lie. Mia added, even some of the guests have noticed. One told me the service felt more polished. That's a direct quote. Ethan smiled, but his satisfaction was tinged with caution. We need to stay under the radar, he warned. Robert's already suspicious. If he finds out who's behind this, he'll shut it down before we can make it stick. Robert's unease was palpable. He prowled the hallways like a predator, stopping employees mid-task to question them about changes in their routines. His frustration was evident during a meeting with Marcus Reeves, the head of housekeeping. Something's going on, Marcus, Robert snapped, slamming a report onto the desk. Guest complaints are down, but I'm not the one who authorized these changes. Who's responsible? Marcus, visibly nervous, stammered, I'm not sure, sir. Maybe it's just the staff stepping up. Stepping up? Robert scoffed. They don't step up without a push. Find out who's behind this, now. Meanwhile, Ethan continued his undercover work with growing caution. He noticed Robert's piercing gaze lingering on him during shifts and overheard whispers among staff about the general manager's sudden, intense scrutiny. Despite the mounting tension, Ethan's bond with Sophia deepened. She trusted him in ways she hadn't trusted anyone at the hotel in years. Over coffee during a quiet moment in the cafeteria, Sophia confided in him. You're not like the others, she said, stirring her cup absent-mindedly. Most new hires don't care enough to ask questions, let alone try to fix things. Ethan hesitated. He wanted to tell her the truth about his identity, but knew it wasn't the right time. Instead, he said, I just think things could be better. For everyone. Sophia smiled, a flicker of hope in her eyes. I wish more people thought like you. One afternoon, while Ethan was reorganizing a storage closet, Robert cornered him. You, Robert barked, his eyes narrowing. Ethan, isn't it? Yes, sir, Ethan replied, keeping his tone neutral. I've noticed you're efficient, Robert said, his voice laced with suspicion. Too efficient for someone who's only been here a few weeks. What's your story? Ethan's heart raced, but he forced a calm response. I've worked in a few hotels before this. I guess I've picked up a thing or two. Robert's expression remained unreadable. Well, don't get any ideas. This is my hotel. Stick to your job, and we won't have a problem. Yes, sir, Ethan said, suppressing the urge to challenge him. As Robert stalked away, Ethan realized his cover was wearing thin. He needed to act quickly before Robert uncovered the truth. Later that evening, Sophia approached Ethan in the break room, holding a chart she had prepared. Look at this, she said, pointing to the data. Our system is working. It's not just housekeeping. Every department is seeing improvements. Ethan nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. We can't stop here, he said. If we're going to make these changes permanent, we need to get more people involved. Sophia frowned. You mean more staff? Not just staff, Ethan replied. We need allies in management, people who can push back against Robert. Sophia's eyes widened. That's risky. If Robert finds out, he's already suspicious, Ethan interrupted. But we're running out of time. We need to move fast. As Sophia considered his words, Ethan felt the weight of the decision he was about to make. The small victories they had achieved were just the beginning. If they wanted real change, they would have to risk everything. That night, as Ethan lay in his cramped bed in the staff dormitory, he couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was about to break. The successes they had achieved were a double-edged sword, proof that change was possible, but also a beacon that would draw Robert's wrath. Ethan knew the battle for the Aurora Grande was far from over, and the stakes were about to get much higher. The quiet momentum Ethan Wallace and his small circle of allies had built began to ripple through the Aurora Grande. Employees, once resigned to their daily grind, started to feel a renewed sense of purpose. However, with hope came the unmistakable scent of rebellion, a challenge to the old ways of doing things. And rebellion, as Ethan knew, always drew fire. It started with a whispered conversation at the staff cafeteria. "You know," Jonah muttered to a small group of housekeepers during a break, "these changes, they're not just luck. Someone's taking a stand." Sophia glanced at Ethan, a subtle nod of encouragement in her expression. Slowly, other employees began to voice their frustrations, their ideas, their hopes for what the Aurora Grande could become. Ethan listened carefully, jotting down notes in a small journal he kept hidden in his locker. During one of these impromptu meetings, Mia shared something that shifted the group's focus entirely: a worn, leather-bound journal. "I've been keeping this," she said, placing it on the cafeteria table. "Every time a guest complains about poor service or an employee is reprimanded unfairly, I write it down. I thought maybe one day someone would care." Ethan opened the journal, his eyes scanning page after page of handwritten accounts. It was a damning indictment of the Aurora Grande's toxic culture: exhausted staff, unrealistic demands, and punitive management practices. "This is powerful," Ethan said, his voice steady. "But it's more than just a journal. This is evidence." Sophia, Jonah, Mia, and Ethan began sharing their findings discreetly with other employees, building a quiet coalition. They held small meetings in the laundry room after hours and passed notes during shifts. The group called themselves The Rising, as a nod to their shared goal of uplifting the staff and the hotel itself. One evening, Sophia presented a new idea to the group: a streamlined communication system that allowed departments to share updates in real time. It was simple: color-coded status boards in the staff areas, along with a shared digital log, accessible from reception, housekeeping, and maintenance. "It won't solve everything," she said, "but it's a start." Ethan added, "Small changes can lead to bigger ones. If this works, it'll be hard for anyone to ignore." The group implemented the system in secret, and within days, its impact was undeniable. Rooms were cleaned faster, guests received better service, and employee frustrations began to ease. The coalition's success emboldened them, but it also caught the attention of their greatest adversary. Robert Hawthorne's growing paranoia reached its peak. His unannounced inspections became more frequent, and his interrogations of staff more aggressive. Employees whispered about his fits of anger behind closed doors, and a palpable tension spread throughout the hotel. One day, during a particularly tense shift, Marcus Reeves cornered Ethan in the storage room. "Look," Marcus said, his voice low, "I don't know what you're doing, but Robert's on a warpath. He's convinced someone's trying to undermine him." Ethan kept his expression neutral. "I'm just doing my job, Marcus." "Just be careful," Marcus warned. "People who cross Robert don't last long." The breaking point came when Robert called an emergency meeting for all staff. The announcement, plastered across the employee bulletin boards, was simple but ominous. Attendance mandatory. Non-compliance will result in disciplinary action. The meeting took place in the staff cafeteria. Employees filed in, their faces a mix of curiosity and fear. Robert stood at the front, flanked by Marcus and two other department heads. His expression was stone cold. "We've noticed unauthorized changes to hotel procedures," Robert began, his voice sharp. "Let me be clear. This is unacceptable. Anyone caught altering protocols or undermining management will face immediate termination." A tense silence filled the room. Ethan glanced at Sophia, who sat rigidly in her chair, her fists clenched. Jonah, seated at the back, looked ready to explode. Robert continued, "This hotel operates on discipline and order. If you don't like it, you're free to leave." For a moment, no one moved. The fear in the room was suffocating. Then, to Ethan's surprise, Sophia stood up. "With all due respect, Mr. Hawthorne," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "These changes have made our jobs easier and improved guest satisfaction. Isn't that what we all want?" Robert's gaze bore into her. "And you think you have the authority to decide what's best for this hotel?" "It's not just me," Sophia replied, her voice gaining strength. "We've all seen the difference. Guests are happier. Employees are less stressed. The numbers don't lie." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Jonah stood next, his deep voice cutting through the tension. "She's right," he said. "I've worked here longer than anyone, and I've never seen things run this smoothly." One by one, other employees began to speak up. Mia held up her journal, her hands shaking. "This is what we've been dealing with. These changes are the first good thing that's happened here in years." Ethan stayed silent, letting his allies take the lead. He knew this was their moment to shine. Robert's face turned red with fury. "This is insubordination," he hissed. "You don't make the rules. I do." As Robert's voice rose, Ethan felt the weight of the moment. He stood, the room falling silent as every eye turned to him. "With all due respect, sir," Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. "Isn't it worth listening to your employees? They're the heart of this hotel. Without them, there's no Aurora Grand." The room held its collective breath. Robert's gaze locked onto Ethan, suspicion flashing in his eyes. "Who are you to tell me how to run my hotel?" Robert demanded. Ethan didn't flinch. "Just someone who cares about making it better." The tension was electric. As the meeting broke up, whispers filled the room. Robert stormed out, leaving an ominous warning. "This isn't over." Ethan knew the battle lines had been drawn. The rebellion had begun, and there was no turning back. But as he exchanged a glance with Sophia, Jonah, and Mia, he also knew they weren't alone. The meeting had ended, but the tension in the Aurora Grand was far from resolved. Employees shuffled out of the cafeteria, their murmurs hushed, but heavy with resentment and fear. Ethan Wallace lingered near the door, scanning the faces of his colleagues, no, his team. He saw defiance in Sophia's determined expression, exhaustion in Jonah's slumped shoulders, and a spark of hope in Mia's resolute gaze. This wasn't just a fight for better working conditions. It was a fight for dignity, for the soul of the hotel. But as Ethan stood amidst the whispers and stolen glances, he knew one thing for certain. Robert Hawthorne wouldn't go down without a fight. In the days following the emergency meeting, the tension in the hotel was palpable. Robert Hawthorne's anger had cast a long shadow over the staff. Employees whispered in hallways, their eyes darting nervously toward security cameras and supervisors. Everyone felt the invisible weight of surveillance. "Do you think he'll follow through on his threats?" Mia whispered to Ethan, as they prepared breakfast service in the main dining room. Ethan tightened his grip on the coffee pot he was carrying. Robert thrives on fear. But if we give in now, we'll lose everything we've gained. Mia nodded, but didn't look convinced. The journal she'd once carried proudly was now hidden deep in her locker, far from Robert's prying eyes. The first blow came 2 days later, when Robert announced new policies during the morning shift briefing. His tone was icy, his words cutting. Effective immediately, all staff will adhere to strict schedules, and unauthorized breaks are prohibited, he declared. Additionally, any deviations from standard operating procedures will result in immediate termination. The announcement was met with stunned silence, broken only by the sound of Jonah muttering under his breath. "He's choking the life out of this place." Ethan watched as the mood in the room shifted from quiet defiance to outright despair. He exchanged a glance with Sophia, who gave a barely perceptible nod. They had to act, and soon. That afternoon, Ethan found Jonah in the employee lounge, his face dark with anger. "They suspended me," Jonah spat, slamming a folded piece of paper onto the table. "Insubordination," they said, "for questioning the new rules." Ethan picked up the paper, his eyes scanning the formal language of the suspension notice. It was a calculated move, meant to send a message to the rest of the staff. "This isn't right," Sophia said, her voice trembling with indignation. "Jonah's one of the hardest working people here." Ethan's jaw tightened. "This is a scare tactic. He's trying to break us." "What do we do?" Mia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan hesitated, then spoke with quiet determination. "We don't back down. But we need to be smart about this. If we escalate too quickly, he'll use it against us." Later that evening, Ethan found Sophia in the staff cafeteria. She was seated alone, staring at a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. "Sophia," Ethan said softly, sliding into the seat across from her. She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. "What is it, Ethan?" He hesitated for a moment, then leaned in closer. "I need to tell you something." "The truth," Sophia frowned, her brows knitting together in confusion. "What are you talking about?" Ethan took a deep breath, his heart pounding. "I'm not who you think I am. My name isn't Ethan Collins, it's Ethan Wallace. I'm the owner of this hotel." The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia stared at him, her expression shifting from confusion to shock to anger. "You're the owner?" she finally said, her voice low and tight. "You've been pretending to be one of us this whole time." Ethan nodded. "I had to. I needed to see what was really happening here, and I couldn't do that from behind a desk." Sophia pushed her chair back, standing abruptly. "Do you have any idea what we've been through? What you've let happen under your watch?" Ethan stood as well, his voice pleading. "That's why I'm here, Sophia. To fix it. But I can't do it alone. I need your help." For a long moment, Sophia said nothing. Then finally she sat back down. "You'd better not be lying to me, Ethan. Because if you are, I'll never forgive you." The next morning, Ethan and Sophia gathered a small group of trusted employees in the laundry room. Jonah, still fuming from his suspension, was among them, along with Mia and 2 others, Clara, a housekeeper, and Luis, a maintenance worker. Ethan laid out his plan. "We're going to document everything, every violation, every unfair policy, every piece of evidence that shows how this hotel has been mismanaged." "And then what?" Jonah asked skeptically. "Hand it over to Robert?" Ethan shook his head. We take it to the board of directors. They're the only ones with the authority to remove Robert." The room fell silent as the gravity of Ethan's words sank in. Finally, Sophia spoke. If we're doing this, we need to be careful. Robert's already suspicious. Agreed, Ethan said. We'll work in pairs, and we'll keep our movements discreet. No one works alone. As the group dispersed, Ethan felt a small sense of relief. For the first time, it felt like they had a real plan. But that relief was short-lived. Later that evening, as Ethan was cleaning the hotel bar, he overheard a conversation between Robert and Marcus. "I've had enough of this nonsense," Robert was saying, his voice low but furious. "I ordered a background check on that new waiter. I want to know exactly who he is." Ethan's heart sank. If Robert discovered his true identity, the entire plan would fall apart. The storm brewing in the Aurora Grande was reaching its crescendo. Ethan Wallace had spent weeks walking a tightrope, balancing his undercover role with his growing desire to bring meaningful change to the hotel. But now, with Robert Hawthorne's suspicion intensifying and a background check looming, the time for subterfuge was running out. Ethan paced in the laundry room, his nerves frayed. Sophia stood nearby, arms crossed, her expression a mix of skepticism and worry. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" Sophia asked, breaking the tense silence. "If Robert finds out before we're ready—" "He already suspects me," Ethan interrupted. "And now that he's running a background check, it's only a matter of time before he discovers the truth. It's better if I control the narrative." Sophia sighed, shaking her head. "You're taking a huge risk, Ethan." "I know," Ethan said, meeting her gaze. "But if I don't tell the staff who I really am, they'll never trust me enough to help me finish this." That evening, Ethan gathered a small group of trusted employees in the employee lounge. Jonah, Mia, Clara, Luis, and Sophia were there, each of them watching Ethan with varying degrees of curiosity and concern. "I need to tell you all something," Ethan began, his voice steady despite the nerves churning in his stomach. "My name isn't Ethan Collins. It's Ethan Wallace. I'm the owner of this hotel." The room fell into a stunned silence. Jonah's jaw dropped, Mia's eyes widened, and Clara gasped audibly. "You're the owner?" Jonah finally managed, his voice tinged with disbelief. "You've been working alongside us this whole time?" Ethan nodded. "I needed to see what was really happening here. The reports I was getting from Robert didn't match the complaints from guests or the numbers in our financials. I couldn't understand why. So I came here to see for myself." "And what did you find?" Mia asked quietly, her voice trembling with emotion. Ethan's gaze swept over the group, his expression earnest. "I found people who cared deeply about their jobs, who worked tirelessly despite being overworked, underappreciated, and mismanaged. And I found a system that's broken, a culture of fear and mistrust that's been allowed to fester under Robert's leadership." Sophia stepped forward, her arms still crossed, but her expression softening. "So, what's your plan, Ethan? If you're just here to observe, then nothing's going to change." Ethan shook his head. "I'm not just observing anymore. I'm taking action. But I can't do it without all of you." He turned to Jonah. "You've been here the longest. You know this hotel better than anyone. Your experience is invaluable." To Mia, he said, "Your journal is proof of everything we've been dealing with. If we can present that to the board, it could make all the difference." And to Sophia, he added, "You're the heart of this team, Sophia. People trust you. I need you to help me keep everyone united." Sophia studied him for a long moment, before finally nodding. "All right, Ethan. I'm in. But if you let us down, there's no coming back from it." The group spent the next hour strategizing. Ethan laid out his plan to document every instance of mismanagement and employee mistreatment, compiling a case that would be impossible for the board to ignore. "We'll need more allies," Sophia said. "If it's just us, Robert will crush us before we get anywhere." Ethan nodded. "We'll start with the people we trust the most. But we have to move quickly. Robert's paranoia is growing, and we're running out of time." Over the next few days, Ethan and his team worked tirelessly. Jonah, despite his suspension, secretly gathered testimony from other longtime employees. Maya shared her journal entries, which Ethan painstakingly copied into a digital file. Sophia used her position as a trusted waitress to discreetly gauge other employees' willingness to join their cause. But as their network grew, so did the risk. Robert's suspicion had reached a fever pitch. Employees whispered about his increased surveillance and random spot checks. Marcus, the head of housekeeping, began questioning staff about their interactions with Ethan. One afternoon, while cleaning a guest suite, Ethan found himself face to face with Marcus. "I've been hearing things about you," Marcus said, his tone loaded with suspicion. "You're awfully friendly with the staff for someone who's new here?" Ethan forced a casual smile. "Just trying to learn the ropes. Isn't that what new hires are supposed to do?" Marcus narrowed his eyes, but said nothing more, leaving Ethan with a sinking feeling that the walls were closing in. Late one night, Ethan met Sophia in the kitchen, where they could talk, without fear of being overheard. She looked more anxious than he'd ever seen her. "Robert's ordered full background checks on all the new hires," she whispered. "If he finds out who you are—" "I know," Ethan said, cutting her off. "But we're so close, Sophia. We can't stop now." "What happens if he exposes you before you're ready?" Sophia asked, her voice rising with frustration. "What happens to us?" Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "If he exposes me, I'll take full responsibility. I won't let him punish anyone else." Sophia stared at him for a long moment, before finally nodding. "You'd better mean that, Ethan. Because if you don't, we're all screwed." The breakthrough came late one night, when Ethan and Sophia were reviewing Mia's journal entries. As they combed through her meticulous notes, something caught Ethan's eye: a pattern of financial discrepancies in employee payroll and departmental budgets. "This doesn't add up," Ethan said, pointing to the numbers. "If these figures are correct, someone's been skimming money off the top." Sophia frowned. "You think it's Robert?" "It has to be," Ethan said. "He's the only one with access to these accounts." The realization hit them both at once. They now had the evidence they needed to not only expose Robert's mismanagement, but to implicate him in outright fraud. As they stared at the damning numbers, Ethan felt a surge of determination. This was their chance to turn the tide, but it also meant the stakes were higher than ever. The night felt heavier than usual at the Aurora Grand. Ethan Wallace, now armed with incriminating evidence against Robert Hawthorne, knew he was walking a razor-thin line. The financial irregularities he and Sophia uncovered weren't just proof of Robert's incompetence. They were the smoking gun of fraud. But exposing them would require precision, strategy, and a willingness to take risks that could topple everything he had built. Ethan spent the next morning carefully copying the financial records into a secure folder. Every number, every anomaly, every transaction screamed of Robert's abuse of power. But a damning file wasn't enough. Ethan needed testimonies, stories that would humanize the suffering caused by Robert's mismanagement. During a break, Ethan called an emergency meeting with Sophia, Jonah, and Mia in the storage room. "This isn't just about bad leadership anymore," Ethan began, his voice low but resolute. "This is fraud. Robert's been siphoning money from payroll and budgets, while the rest of you scrape by." Maya clenched her fists. "I knew something wasn't right." How could he sit in his plush office while we struggle to make ends meet? Jonah nodded grimly. He's been stealing from all of us. This has to end. Ethan laid out the plan. They would gather anonymous testimonies from employees who had suffered under Robert's rule, from unfair terminations to withheld wages. Jonah and Mia would lead the charge, quietly speaking to their coworkers and recording their accounts. We need to show the board that this isn't just about numbers, it's about people, Ethan said. If we can combine the financial records with your stories, they won't be able to ignore us. Ethan's growing network began to take shape. Jonah approached Luis, a maintenance worker with a reputation for being outspoken. Despite his initial skepticism, Luis agreed to share his story of how Robert had denied him overtime pay after working 3 consecutive double shifts. Meanwhile, Mia recruited Clara, a housekeeper who had been reprimanded for wasting time when she tried to report broken equipment. Clara's account highlighted how Robert's cost-cutting measures jeopardized not only the staff's efficiency, but also their safety. Even Marcus, the strict head of housekeeping, began to waver. After a tense conversation with Jonah, Marcus admitted that Robert had pressured him to falsify cleaning reports to boost the hotel's ratings. I don't like the man, Marcus confessed. But if I speak out, I'm risking my job. We're all risking something, Jonah replied. But if we don't stand together, nothing will change. As Ethan's network expanded, Robert's paranoia intensified. Employees whispered about his sudden appearances in unexpected places, his pointed questions about who was stirring up trouble. Ethan could feel Robert's eyes on him during every shift, his suspicion growing with each passing day. One evening, while Ethan was restocking the minibar in a suite, Robert cornered him in the hallway. "Ethan Collins, isn't it?" Robert asked, his tone dripping with condescension. "You've been quite the busy bee lately." Ethan forced a polite smile. "Just doing my job, sir." Robert mused, his gaze narrowing. "You're new here, yet you seem awfully involved, almost like you're trying to prove something." Ethan's heart raced, but he kept his composure. "I take pride in my work. That's all." Robert leaned closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "Don't think I don't know what you're up to. One wrong move, and you're out." As Robert walked away, Ethan clenched his fists, his resolve hardening. Time was running out. Late that night, Ethan and Sophia met in the kitchen to review the employee testimonies. Muya had compiled over 20 accounts, each one painting a harrowing picture of life under Robert's rule. "This is enough to take him down," Sophia said, her eyes alight with determination. "The board won't be able to ignore this." But as Ethan scrolled through the financial records one last time, he noticed something alarming: a series of recent transactions from a miscellaneous account. The amounts were significant and the descriptions vague. "These payments, they don't make sense," Ethan murmured. "It's like he's trying to hide something." Sophia frowned. "What if it's a slush fund? For bribes or personal expenses?" Ethan's stomach turned. "We need to dig deeper." The following morning, Robert summoned Ethan to his office. The air was thick with tension as Ethan stepped inside, his every instinct screaming to turn and run. "I've been looking into your background, Ethan Collins," Robert began, his voice deceptively calm. "And I have to say, your work history is interesting." Ethan's pulse quickened. Had Robert found the cracks in his story? "Interesting how?" Ethan asked, feigning ignorance. Robert leaned back in his chair, a predator savoring his prey. "You don't seem to have any verifiable references. No previous employers to vouch for you. Almost like you don't exist." Ethan forced a laugh. "Well, I guess that makes me a mystery man." Robert's smile didn't reach his eyes. Indeed, but mysteries have a way of unraveling. As Ethan left the office, he knew his time was almost up. The next move would be critical. That night, Ethan and Sophia uncovered the truth behind the mysterious transactions. Robert had been using hotel funds to pay off external auditors and maintain his facade of competence. The evidence was damning and dangerous. "This is it," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "This is how we bring him down." Sophia placed a hand on his arm. "Are you ready for this?" Ethan nodded. "Ready or not, it's happening." The next morning, Ethan sent an encrypted email to the board of directors, attaching the financial records and employee testimonies. He requested an emergency meeting, knowing full well that Robert would try to block it. As he hit send, his phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Robert's onto us. Be careful." Ethan exhaled slowly, bracing himself. The battle was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. Would the board act on the evidence before Robert uncovered Ethan's true identity? Or would Robert strike first, silencing Ethan and his allies for good? The boardroom of the Aurora Grand was usually a place of quiet deliberation, where polished executives discussed market trends and profit margins. Today, however, it was the epicenter of a storm. Ethan Wallace sat at the far end of the table, his heart pounding as he prepared to present the evidence that could shatter the hotel's leadership and his carefully constructed cover. The board of directors filed in, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Robert Hawthorne, the general manager, followed shortly after, his face a mask of forced calm. He took his seat opposite Ethan, his eyes narrowing as if daring Ethan to make a move. "Mr. Collins," began Margaret Hayes, the chairwoman of the board, "you requested this emergency meeting. Let's hope it's worth our time." Ethan stood, his palms sweating despite his outward composure. "Thank you for coming, everyone. I assure you this is a matter of utmost importance. What I'm about to share concerns the future of the Aurora Grand and its reputation." Ethan clicked on the projector, and the first slide illuminated the room. It was a financial ledger, with red flags marking questionable transactions. "This," Ethan began, his voice steady, "is a record of financial irregularities over the past 2 years. Funds meant for payroll and maintenance have been diverted to a miscellaneous account, controlled by Mr. Robert Hawthorne." Gasps rippled through the room. Robert leaned forward, his tone dripping with condescension. "These are serious accusations, Mr. Collins. Do you have proof, or are you wasting everyone's time?" Ethan pressed a button, and the next slide appeared. Bank statements and signed approvals linking Robert to the fraudulent transfers. The tension in the room was palpable. Margaret Hayes leaned forward, her eyes piercing. "Mr. Hawthorne, care to explain?" Robert stammered. This is a misunderstanding. These transactions were authorized for operational needs." "Operational needs?" Ethan interrupted. "Like paying off auditors to cover declining standards or funneling money into personal accounts?" Robert's face turned crimson. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Who even are you to make these claims?" Ethan took a deep breath. The moment he had dreaded now, unavoidable. "I'm Ethan Wallace," he said, his voice firm, "owner of Wallace Hotels and your employer." The room erupted in stunned murmurs. Robert's eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed with fury. This is a farce. He's lying." Margaret raised a hand to silence the commotion. "Is this true, Mr. Wallace?" Ethan nodded. "Yes. I went undercover to understand the real issues plaguing our flagship hotel. What I discovered was worse than I imagined. He turned back to the screen, displaying employee testimonies. These are accounts from our staff, accounts of overwork, mistreatment, and neglect. The Aurora Grand isn't failing because of external factors. It's failing because of internal mismanagement. Sophia stepped forward from the corner of the room, holding a thick folder. And here's the evidence to back it up, she said, handing it to Margaret. The chairwoman flipped through the pages, her expression darkening with every word. Finally, she looked up at Robert. Do you deny these allegations? Robert stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is absurd. I've dedicated years to this hotel. Without me, it would have collapsed long ago. Without you, Ethan shot back, the employees wouldn't fear for their jobs. Without you, the hotel wouldn't be cutting corners while bleeding money. Margaret Hayes exchanged a look with the other board members, then spoke with quiet authority. Mr. Hawthorne, effective immediately, you are relieved of your duties, pending further investigation. Robert's face twisted with rage. You'll regret this, all of you. Security escorted him out, his protests echoing down the hall. Ethan felt a surge of relief, but knew the hardest part was still ahead. Margaret turned to him. Mr. Wallace, I appreciate your initiative, but this approach was highly unorthodox. Do you truly believe the staff will trust you after this? Ethan nodded. I do, because they've seen that I'm willing to fight for them. After the meeting, Ethan gathered the employees in the grand ballroom. Whispers filled the room as staff speculated about what was happening. Ethan stepped onto the small stage, his heart heavy with the weight of the moment. Good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ethan Wallace. I've been working among you as Ethan Collins. Gasps and murmurs swept through the crowd, followed by stunned silence. I went undercover because I needed to understand what was really happening here. Ethan continued. What I found was heartbreaking. This hotel's greatest asset isn't its luxury or its location. It's you, the people who make it run. Sophia joined him on stage, her presence a quiet reassurance. The changes you've started, better communication, teamwork, innovative ideas, are proof of what this hotel can become. Ethan took a deep breath. Starting today, I'm implementing reforms based on your feedback. Improved schedules, fair pay, opportunities for growth. Because you deserve to be valued. As the employees broke into applause, a figure lingered at the edge of the room. Ethan recognized him immediately. Robert Hawthorne, watching from the shadows, with an unreadable expression. Ethan's pulse quickened. Had Robert truly accepted his defeat? Or was this just the beginning of another battle? The sun filtered through the grand windows of the Aurora Grand as Ethan Wallace walked through the lobby. The atmosphere felt lighter than it had in weeks, but the work was far from over. Ethan's next challenge was clear. He had to win back the trust of the staff and ensure the reforms were not just words, but actions that could reshape the future of the hotel. Ethan began his day early, donning the waiter's uniform he had worn during his undercover mission. This time, however, he walked into the employee lounge not as Ethan Collins, but as the owner of the Aurora Grand. The murmur of voices hushed as the staff noticed him, and a mix of curiosity and uncertainty filled the room. Good morning, Ethan began, his tone warm but resolute. I know many of you are wondering what comes next. I also know some of you may doubt my intentions or my ability to bring real change. That's why I'm here, not as your boss, but as someone who wants to listen, learn, and earn your trust. A hand shot up from the back. It was Peter, a veteran bellhop, who had always spoken his mind. With all due respect, Mr. Wallace, how do we know this isn't just another PR move? We've heard promises before. Ethan nodded, appreciating the directness. You're right to be skeptical, Peter. Words mean little without action. That's why I'm starting by working alongside all of you, just as I did before. I'll be shadowing different departments each week, and I'll be available for open discussions every Friday. But this isn't just about me. It's about creating a workplace where everyone feels valued. Ethan's plan began with a series of town hall meetings, inviting staff from all departments to share their concerns and ideas. These meetings were held in the staff lounge, a space that was quickly transformed into a vibrant forum for open dialogue. Sophia Carter, now a trusted ally and unofficial spokesperson for the staff, played a key role in facilitating these discussions. Her natural ability to connect with her colleagues helped break down barriers, encouraging even the shyest employees to speak up. "Let's start with something simple," Sophia said during the first meeting. "If you could change one thing about your job, what would it be?" Hands went up, and the responses came pouring in. Better scheduling, updated equipment, clearer communication from management. Ethan took meticulous notes, promising to address each point with concrete solutions. "I never realized how much miscommunication was affecting everything," Ethan admitted to Sophia after the meeting. "It's no wonder the staff felt so demoralized." "It's not just miscommunication," Sophia replied thoughtfully. "It's a lack of empathy. People need to feel heard, not just managed." Ethan wasted no time putting the feedback into action. New initiatives were rolled out within weeks. Flexible scheduling. A new system allowed employees to swap shifts easily, thus reducing burnout and improving work-life balance. Updated equipment. Maintenance budgets were increased to replace outdated tools, ensuring a safer and more efficient work environment. Training programs. Cross-departmental workshops were introduced, giving employees a chance to learn new skills and understand each other's roles. One morning, Ethan joined the housekeeping staff to test the new equipment. As he helped Jonah, the veteran bellhop, carry a replacement vacuum to one of the suites, Jonah chuckled. "I never thought I'd see the day when the owner of this place was lugging vacuums with the rest of us." Ethan smiled. "Well, if I'm going to make decisions, I need to understand the reality behind them." Despite the progress, not everyone embraced the changes. A group of middle managers, loyal to Robert Hawthorne, began to push back subtly. They resisted the new policies, claiming they disrupted the traditional flow of the hotel. One evening, Ethan overheard two managers whispering near the elevators. "If Wallace thinks he can turn this place upside down, he's in for a rude awakening," one of them said. "We'll make sure his little experiment fails." Ethan clenched his fists, but kept his composure. He knew confrontation wouldn't solve the problem. He needed to win them over, or neutralize their influence. To counter the resistance, Ethan organized a special staff retreat, a first in the hotel's history. Held at a nearby resort, the retreat included team-building exercises, workshops on leadership, and plenty of opportunities for relaxations and camaraderie. During one activity, employees were asked to share personal stories about why they chose to work in hospitality. Sophia spoke about her love for creating memorable experiences for guests, while Jonah shared how the hotel had been a second home during difficult times in his life. Ethan also shared his story, revealing how his father's passion for hospitality had inspired him to continue the family legacy. "This isn't just a business to me," he said. "It's a community, and I want all of us to feel proud to be part of it." By the end of the retreat, even some of the skeptical managers began to soften. "Maybe there's something to this," one of them admitted quietly to Sophia. As the reforms gained momentum, Ethan received an unexpected letter delivered to his office. The handwriting was familiar. It belonged to his late father. Inside was a message that stopped Ethan in his tracks. "Ethan, Remember that success is measured not by profits, but by the lives you touch. Lead with integrity, and the rest will follow. The words resonated deeply, reaffirming Ethan's commitment to his vision. But as he placed the letter on his desk, his phone buzzed with a notification. An anonymous tip, warning of a potential scandal brewing at the rival hotel. Ethan's heart sank. Just as the Aurora Grand was finding its footing, a new storm loomed on the horizon. The air at the Aurora Grand buzzed with cautious optimism. Ethan Wallace's reforms were taking root, with employees feeling a newfound sense of pride and purpose. Yet the work was far from over. Ethan's journey toward rebuilding his hotel's legacy was about to face its most formidable test, a coordinated effort to undermine his leadership from within. Ethan sat in his office, the anonymous warning about sabotage still fresh in his mind. The message was vague but unsettling. Not everyone wants to see you succeed. Watch your back. Sophia Carter entered with her usual vibrant energy, a clipboard in hand. The new scheduling system has been a hit, she reported, her smile faltering when she saw Ethan's serious expression. What's wrong? Ethan handed her the note. Someone's trying to sabotage the reforms, he said. I don't know who, but I have a feeling it's coming from the middle management. Sophia's face darkened. We've made too much progress to let this happen. We need to act. Ethan nodded. But carefully. If we accuse the wrong people, it could undo everything. To strengthen the unity among employees, Ethan called for an all-hands meeting. The ballroom, normally reserved for extravagant events, was filled with staff from every department. Ethan took the stage, his gaze sweeping across the room. I know, change isn't easy, he began. I know, some of you may feel uncertain or even threatened by what's happening. But let me assure you, these changes are not about taking control away. They're about giving it back. To all of you. The room was silent as Ethan continued. This hotel is only as strong as the people who bring it to life every day. Together, we can make the Aurora grand, a place where everyone, guests and staff alike, feels valued. Sophia stepped forward, adding her voice. I've worked here for 5 years, and this is the first time I've felt like we have a real say in how things are run. If we keep working together, there's nothing we can't achieve. The applause that followed was thunderous, but Ethan noticed a few faces in the crowd, managers loyal to Robert Hawthorne, remaining stoic. The next few days were tense. Ethan and Sophia worked discreetly to uncover the source of the sabotage. They analyzed employee records, monitored communications, and even sought input from Jonah, the veteran bellhop, and Mia, the perceptive receptionist. One afternoon, Jonah approached Ethan with a lead. I overheard some managers talking near the service elevator, he said. They mentioned delaying maintenance requests and creating problems for your new systems. Ethan's jaw tightened. Do you know who it was? Jonah hesitated. I couldn't see them, but I'm pretty sure one of them was Marcus Reeves. Marcus, the head of housekeeping, had always been resistant to change. Ethan decided it was time to confront him. Ethan found Marcus in the staff lounge, sipping coffee and scrolling through his phone. Marcus, can we talk? Ethan asked, his tone calm but firm. Marcus looked up, his expression guarded. What's this about? I've been hearing reports of sabotage, Ethan said bluntly. And your name has come up. Marcus scoffed. Sabotage? That's a strong word, Mr. Wallace. Maybe your precious reforms just aren't as perfect as you think. Ethan didn't flinch. If there are issues with the reforms, we can address them. But deliberately undermining the hotel isn't just unprofessional. It's unethical. Marcus stood, his face red with anger. Do you have any proof, or is this just another witch hunt? I don't need proof to have a conversation, Ethan replied evenly. But if I find evidence, you'll be held accountable. Think about where you stand, Marcus. Are you here to help this hotel succeed or watch it fail? Marcus stormed out without another word, leaving Ethan with more questions than answers. The tension came to a head during a scheduled staff meeting. Sophia took the stage, her usual calm demeanor replaced with fiery determination. I know some of you are resistant to change, she began, her voice echoing through the room. I get it. It's scary. But ask yourselves, what are you really afraid of? Losing control? Or losing the chance to be part of something better? She pointed toward Ethan. This man could have stayed in his penthouse office, but instead, he came down here, put on a uniform, and worked beside us. If that doesn't show commitment, I don't know what does. The room erupted in applause. Even some of the resistant managers appeared moved, though Marcus remained stone-faced in the corner. In the days that followed, the mood at the Aurora Grand shifted. Employees began to rally around Ethan's vision, implementing reforms with renewed enthusiasm. The middle managers who had plotted against him found themselves increasingly isolated as their colleagues embraced the changes. Ethan called a meeting with the remaining holdouts, including Marcus. I'm giving you one last chance, he said. Be part of the solution or step aside. To Ethan's surprise, Marcus spoke up. I've been here a long time, he admitted, and I guess I was afraid of losing the hotel I knew. But maybe it's time to let go. Ethan extended a hand. Then let's build something better. Together. With the internal resistance quelled, Ethan allowed himself a moment of relief. But as he walked into his office, he found another envelope waiting for him. This one bore the logo of the rival hotel chain. Inside was a terse message. Stay out of our way, or we'll make sure you regret it. Ethan's determination hardened. The battle for the Aurora Grand wasn't over. It had only just begun. The skyline of Seattle glimmered in the twilight as the Aurora Grand stood tall, its reputation slowly rebounding. For Ethan Wallace, the recent victories over internal resistance were encouraging, but they also marked the beginning of a new phase, a battle against external forces threatening his mission. Ethan sat in his office, staring at the cryptic note from the rival hotel chain. The warning felt more personal than professional, a direct challenge to his resolve. His thoughts drifted to a box in the corner of the room. It had arrived earlier in the day, marked with his father's handwriting. Opening it, Ethan found a leather-bound journal and a letter. The letter read, Ethan, success isn't measured by profits, but by the lives you touch. Lead with integrity, and people will follow you anywhere. Love, Dad. Ethan's chest tightened. His father's wisdom was a reminder of his mission, not just to restore the Aurora Grand, but to build a legacy of empowerment and excellence. The rival chain, Sterling Sweets International, had been a thorn in Ethan's side for years. Known for aggressive tactics, they were now trying to poach his staff. Sophia entered the rooms, her expression troubled. Ethan, Jonah just told me he was offered a position at Sterling Sweets. Better pay, better hours. Ethan's brow furrowed. What did he say? He turned it down, Sophia replied, smiling faintly, but he's worried others might not. Determined to act, Ethan called an emergency leadership meeting. We need to show our team that staying here isn't just about loyalty. It's about being part of something greater. Jonah spoke up. You've already started doing that, Ethan? But maybe it's time to celebrate how far we've come. Inspired by Jonah's suggestion, Ethan decided to host an employee appreciation event. The ballroom was transformed into a vibrant space, filled with food, music, and photos, showcasing the hotel's journey. As the night unfolded, Ethan took the stage. "Tonight is about you," he said, his voice steady. "Every success we've had is because of your ideas, your dedication, your belief in what we can achieve together." The applause was thunderous, but what touched Ethan most was the sense of camaraderie in the room. Employees who had once been skeptical now beamed with pride. The next morning, Sterling Sweets escalated their attack. A series of online reviews falsely accused the Aurora Grand of unsanitary conditions and poor service. The smear campaign threatened to undo all of Ethan's hard work. Mia burst into Ethan's office, holding her tablet. "You need to see this," she said, showing him the fake reviews. Ethan's jaw tightened. "They're playing dirty." "We can fight back," Sophia said, her eyes blazing with determination. "But we have to do it right." Ethan called on an old friend, Chloe Bennett, a PR expert with a reputation for turning crises into opportunities. "First, we address the reviews head-on," Chloe advised. "Respond calmly, factually, and transparently. Then we highlight the positive stories from your employees and guests." Jonah suggested involving loyal customers. "We have regulars who love this place. Let's ask them to share their experiences." The team worked tirelessly, crafting responses, reaching out to customers, and flooding social media with uplifting stories about the Aurora Grand's transformation. Employees shared behind-the-scenes glimpses of their work, humanizing the hotel in a way Sterling Sweets couldn't replicate. As the campaign gained traction, Ethan received an unexpected phone call from Robert Hawthorne. "Ethan," Robert began, his tone subdued, "I heard about Sterling Sweets. They tried the same thing when I managed another property. I fought them off, but I made mistakes that nearly cost me everything." Ethan was cautious. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I don't want you to fail," Robert admitted. "This hotel means more to me than I realized. If you're willing, I can help." Ethan hesitated, but ultimately agreed. "Meet me tomorrow morning. We'll talk." With Robert's insights, Ethan's team launched a final push. They invited local journalists to tour the hotel, showing off the improvements and giving employees a platform to share their experiences. Jonah led a group of bellhops in a demonstration of their new customer service protocols, while Sophia guided journalists through the revamped dining experience. Maya highlighted the innovative communication system that had streamlined operations. The resulting articles painted the Aurora Grand as a beacon of innovation and resilience, silencing the smear campaign. As the dust settled, Ethan received another letter, this time from Sterling Sweets. Inside was a contract for the purchase of the Aurora Grand. The note read, "Every empire falls. Name your price." Ethan's hands trembled as he folded the letter. The battle wasn't over, but now it was personal. The morning sun filtered through the windows of Ethan Wallace's office as he sat at his desk, the contract from Sterling Sweets lying before him. The rival hotel chain's message was clear. They intended to buy out the Aurora Grand or crush it. The stakes had never been higher, but Ethan was determined not to fold. This wasn't just a battle for a hotel. It was a fight for the values he had rebuilt it on. Word spread quickly among Ethan's team about Sterling Sweets' aggressive move. Sophia was the first to confront Ethan. "What's the plan?" she asked, her voice a mixture of concern and determination. Ethan held up the contract. "They want us to sell, but that's not happening." Jonah chimed in. "They're trying to scare us. We've come too far to back down now." Mia joined them, holding a folder of recent guest reviews. "And we're winning, Ethan. The reviews from our loyal customers are burying their smear campaign." Ethan nodded. "This is about more than business now. If we let them succeed, it sends a message that bullies win. That's not who we are. Ethan called an emergency meeting with his senior staff. We need a dual approach, he began. First, we strengthen our internal operations to make sure there's no room for error. Second, we counter their narrative with an even stronger one. Chloe Bennett, the P-Gear expert, outlined their next steps. We need to highlight the human side of the Aurora Grand. Personal stories from employees, community involvement, and guest testimonials will show the world what makes this hotel special. Sophia suggested organizing a community event. Let's host an open house, invite locals, partners, and media to experience the changes firsthand. Ethan agreed. And we'll unveil our new employee-led initiatives. Let's show them what real innovation looks like. As the team mobilized, Ethan discovered that not everyone was on board. Some middle managers, still resistant to his reforms, expressed doubts about the open house. This isn't the time for distractions, one manager argued during a meeting. We should focus on maintaining operations, not hosting events. Ethan's patience wore thin. If we don't show the world who we are, Sterling Suites will define us on their terms. This event isn't a distraction. It's our chance to prove we're stronger than ever. Despite the pushback, Ethan's resolve inspired his team. Sophia rallied the staff, while Jonah and Mia worked on logistics. Even Robert Hawthorne, the once antagonistic general manager, offered to help. If you need someone to deal with vendors or handle last-minute issues, I'm your guy, he told Ethan. The ballroom of the Aurora Grand transformed into a bustling hub of activity. Each department showcased their contributions. Housekeeping, a live demonstration of their new task management system. Reception, testimonials from guests who praised the seamless check-in process. Dining, Sophia and her team served dishes inspired by local cuisine, emphasizing the hotel's connection to the community. The highlight of the event was a speech by Ethan. Standing on a small stage, he addressed the crowd of employees, guests, and media. A year ago, this hotel was struggling, not because of its location or facilities, but because we forgot what made it special. The people, Ethan said. Today, we're not just a hotel. We're a community, a family, and an example of what's possible when we listen to each other. The applause was thunderous, but Ethan knew the real test was still ahead. As the event wound down, Ethan received a call from Sterling Suites' CEO, Victor Hale. Impressive show, Victor said, his tone dripping with condescension. But let's cut to the chase. Everyone has a price. What's yours? Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. There is no price, Victor. You can't buy what we've built here. Victor's laughter was cold. Then, I'll see you on the battlefield. Ethan hung up, his resolve hardening. Let him try, he muttered. The next day, a surprising message arrived. An open letter from former Sterling Suites employees who had left due to unethical practices. The letter condemned Victor Hale's tactics and praised the Aurora Grand for its integrity and innovation. Chloe suggested leveraging the letter in their campaign. This is a powerful narrative, Ethan. It shows the contrast between their way of doing business and ours. Ethan hesitated. I don't want to stoop to their level. You're not, Sophia interjected. You're standing up for what's right. The public response was overwhelming. Social media buzzed with stories from employees and guests alike. The open house video went viral, highlighting the hotel's transformation and its people-first approach. Meanwhile, Ethan continued to focus on internal improvements. He introduced a mentorship program, pairing seasoned employees like Jonah with newer staff members. The program not only boosted morale, but also reinforced the sense of unity within the team. As Ethan reviewed the week's progress, A courier arrived with an envelope marked confidential. Inside was a file detailing Sterling Suites' next move, an attempt to sabotage the Aurora Grand's partnerships with key suppliers. Ethan's jaw clenched. The fight wasn't over, and the next battle would require every ounce of his leadership. The night was quiet, as Ethan Wallace stood on the rooftop of the Aurora Grand, gazing at the Seattle skyline. Below him, the once troubled hotel now bustled with life, a shining symbol of resilience and innovation. Yet, the battle wasn't over. The courier's envelope lay on the table behind him, its contents clear. Sterling Suites was planning a final underhanded strike to destabilize his operations. This isn't just business, Ethan thought, gripping the railing. This is personal. Ethan gathered his core team, Sophia, Jonah, Mia, and Chloe, for an emergency meeting the next morning. The atmosphere in the room was tense. "They're targeting our suppliers," Ethan began, spreading out the documents on the table. "If they succeed, we'll face delays in essential deliveries, everything from linens to kitchen supplies." Jonah clenched his fists. "That's low, even for them." Sophia leaned forward. "We've worked too hard to let this sabotage undo everything." Chloe nodded. "We need to act fast. Let's start by securing alternative suppliers and issuing public statements to stay ahead of the narrative." Ethan agreed. "I'll personally reach out to our key partners. They need to know the truth." Ethan spent the next few days meeting with suppliers, sharing his vision for the Aurora Grand, and reassuring them of the hotel's stability. Some were initially hesitant, but Ethan's transparency and passion won them over. Meanwhile, Sophia and Mia worked with the operations team to create contingency plans. Jonah coordinated with staff to ensure seamless service despite potential shortages. The team's unity and determination became a beacon of hope for the employees, inspiring them to rally behind Ethan's leadership. One evening, Jonah approached Ethan with a sheepish smile. "You know, I've been here for decades, but I've never seen this kind of spirit among the staff. It's like we're finally a family." Ethan clapped him on the shoulder. "That's the greatest compliment you could give me, Jonah." The rivalry reached its climax during a high-profile industry event, a gala attended by key players in the hospitality world. Ethan knew Victor Hoyle, the CEO of Sterling Suites, would use the opportunity to spread misinformation about the Aurora Grand. As the evening progressed, Ethan mingled with guests, sharing stories of the hotel's transformation. Sophia and Jonah circulated, engaging attendees with genuine enthusiasm about their roles. Chloe had prepared a short video, showcasing testimonials from employees and guests, which played during dinner, drawing applause from the crowd. Victor Hale, however, wasn't idle. Ethan overheard him spreading rumors about supply chain issues at the Aurora Grand. It was the last straw. Ethan approached Victor calmly but firmly. "If you have something to say about my hotel, Victor, say it to me." Victor smirked. "Just making observations. Competition is healthy, isn't it?" Ethan's gaze didn't waver. "It is. But integrity is what sets competitors apart. If you focused on improving your own business instead of tearing others down, you might find yourself in better standing." Victor's expression darkened, but he didn't reply. Ethan turned and walked away, feeling the weight of his team's trust and the values they had rebuilt together. Back at the Aurora Grand, the team gathered in the ballroom now for an employee appreciation dinner, a tradition Ethan had introduced to honor the people who made the hotel thrive. Jonah delivered a heartfelt toast. "To all of us," he said, raising his glass, "for proving that hard work, trust, and a little bit of courage can turn challenges into triumphs." The room erupted in applause. Ethan looked around, seeing the joy and pride on every face. This wasn't just a hotel anymore. It was a family. Later that evening, Ethan sat in his office, holding the letter from his late father. He read it again, the words resonating deeply. Ethan, remember this. The true legacy of our hotels isn't the chandeliers or the marble floors. It's the people. Value them, and they'll make our name shine brighter than any gold. A tear slipped down Ethan's cheek. He finally understood what his father had been trying to teach him. This wasn't just a business. It was a legacy built on trust, compassion, and innovation. A year later, the Aurora Grand had become the gold standard in the hospitality industry. Employee satisfaction was at an all-time high, and guest reviews celebrated not only the luxurious amenities, but also the warmth and professionalism of the staff. At a gala marking the hotel's one-year anniversary of transformation, Ethan stood on stage, surrounded by his team. He raised his glass. "To all of you," he began, his voice steady and full of pride. "This isn't my victory. It's ours. You've shown the world what's possible when people come together with a shared vision. You've made the Aurora Grand not just a hotel, but a beacon of hope and excellence." The applause was deafening, and Ethan stepped down to embrace Sophia, Jonah, and Mia. The team had become more than colleagues. They were his second family. As Ethan walked through the bustling lobby later that night, he paused to observe a young bellhop helping a guest. The employee's kindness and attentiveness reminded Ethan of why he had gone undercover in the first place. True luxury wasn't in thread counts or gourmet meals. It was in the people who made every guest feel valued and every moment unforgettable. With that thought, Ethan smiled, ready to face the future, knowing the legacy of the Aurora Grand was in good hands. As the story of Ethan Wallace and the Aurora Grand comes to a close, we're reminded of the power of resilience, compassion, and leadership. But let's not end it here. What would you have done in Ethan's shoes? Would you have had the courage to step into the shoes of your employees, to rebuild something not just for profits, but for people? We want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and tell us which moment from Ethan's journey inspired you the most. And if this story moved you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We've got more incredible stories of transformation, hope, and courage coming your way. Let's continue exploring the stories that make us reflect, inspire us to grow, and remind us of what truly matters. See you in the next chapter.